Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live and in color, all the way from the balmy hills of North Texas. I see Tim Stewart, Adam Chandler, Christopher Aguilard. The daddy is in the house. From South Louisiana, Florida, Jeannie Barbara Saunders checking in. Come on, here we go. Justin Shank, Bob for president. That's pretty funny. President of what? That's good. Justin's from the left coast, way out there in California. Just bought him a pond. Hey, there's Ron Ardoin. Good to see Ron. Mike Cottrell checking in. I see Mike's got that top fan going on. Zach Bollinger. Congratulations. Hey, that's cool. Thanks a lot. Danny Mack, here on time. Danny's on time. Danny, I don't know how to break this to you, but you're never late. You're always on time. It doesn't matter what time it is, you're on time. So I'm glad you guys are here. So we're going to have a little bit of fun. Let's see here. Let me find out what we got going on here. Let me do my little thing. Hey, while I'm looking this up so I can find it so I can read your questions and things. Oh, there it is, I think. Yeah, no, I'm wearing a blue shirt. That's a green shirt. Woo! All right, I know it's on here somewhere. I'll find it. Looks like Facebook changed out their format. I see Clark Cole. Josie's checking in with Wayne. Good to see you guys. Oh, there it is right there. Now I found it. They've changed their format. So now, there it is. They got it. All right, cool beans there, guys. Jason Nepstead. Good to see Jason. I haven't seen Jason in a while. All right, tonight I thought I'd talk about, I told the girls to post up hot pond times, because boy, today, I'm sure where you are, it's pretty hot, but dadgum, it's getting hot everywhere, and your ponds are impacted by that, so we need to talk about that just a little bit. So I thought I'd try to cover that, so let me scroll down here and see what all we got going on here. Happy early the 4th, says Adam Chandler. Happy Independence Day. I just hope that we continue to be independent. That's tongue-in-cheek, sort of. Happy Wednesday, says Jacob West. Great new magazine. You know, the magazine just hit. And the mailboxes, I've had several calls, and man, I'm excited. Here's the new magazine right there. Today's the first time I've seen it. Now, there's what we looked like last issue, right there. But now we've changed up the format. We've added some content. We've got better photography. We got some great articles they're really, really practical for you guys. But to kind of show you just the new layout, there's part of what we're doing right there, so you can see it. That the headline is "Pond Treatment Gone Bad." Now that's an article that you guys need to know about. Here's what the story looks like. Let me find it. There's what it looks like inside the magazine. Pond treatment gone bad, and that's basically what happened was. Chris Chavetta, he almost always checks in on this show, and Chris called me one day in a panic. He said, "Hey man, we got fish dying." So what's the matter? Well, they're over there west of St. Louis at Innsbruck, and one of his neighbors, he'd helped him design a pond, and a small pond, and but it stayed muddy. So he called a pond management company over in that neck of the woods, and I know the guy real well. If he'd like to disclose who he is at some point, that's okay with me. I'm not going to do it though. But he came and he brought some alum, and he put some alum in there and tried to buffer it with some hydrated lime. Well, neither treatment worked, and the pond was just as muddy a week later, so he came back out and he tripled the amount of alum. And to make a long story short, he shot the pH, skyrocketed it down on the acid side. The water went from muddy chocolate milk color to almost a Mediterranean blue. And that's what happens when the pH plummets down below, usually about 3. Well, every fish in the pond died. So he's getting to replace the fish, but this story takes you through the process of how it should be done compared to how it was done. So if you get ready to clear up muddy water, this kind of gives you some tips on what not to do. So, that little pause there was I got a call that I had to decline. Maybe I can change some fisheries laws here in horrible California. No, you're on your own. You're the one that has to change those laws in California. That's a state deal. Tim Stewart's got to go. He got to do. You know what? It is Wednesday, and I love that Tim is in the Bible and he's on Wednesday's Bible studies. I love that. That's good. Going to be 98 Friday in Pennsylvania, Todd says. There's Kyle Edwards, Travis Paul Smith. You guys are way ahead of me here. There's Pat Williamson from Oakwood. Mike DeMint checking in from Memphis. Matt Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell. He's tagging Sarah Mitchell. Attaboy. Let's see here. John Henry. Let's see. Travis Smith. Congratulations. You know what? I'm not much on talking about myself. I'm going to tell you what they're talking about here in just a second. But here's the deal. $35 a year. Pond Boss Magazine. If you will just put hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section, click like, and share this video to your timeline, you're going to be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. Say it out loud, Jacob West. Who knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. I can hear him saying that. Calvin Perry, Calvin Perry, go forth. Yo, homie. Well, there's been several people say congratulations, so let me just tell you what's happened to me. I got a call a couple of weeks ago from Tom Lang, who runs the Texas Freshwater Fisheries Center, works for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and Stephen Barden. Well, it seems as though those two guys nominated me and got letters of support from some people in the fisheries business, Dr. Wes Neal, and Gene Gilliland, a longtime colleague of mine from Oklahoma, to nominate me for induction into the American Fisheries Society Fisheries Division Hall of Fame, Hall of Excellence. And they nominated me, and I was voted in, and I'm totally humbled by that because there are some great fisheries people out there that are in it. You know, Dr. Swingle, Dr. Anderson, who has come to a couple of the Pond Boss conferences. He's still going it in his 90s. You know, he ain't going fast, but he's still going. I need to call him. I'll give him a call here in a couple of days. But he, just knowing that I've been thought about by colleagues and peers, you know, is very flattering. And one of the things they brought up were these Wednesday night broadcasts about sharing knowledge and trying to help people be better stewards. So I'm really, really flattered and I'm humbled for that honor, and I deeply appreciate it. And I'm not even comfortable talking about it because I'm talking about me, and I'm not that good at that. So, Jacob, you're hitting me, dude. So, anyway, the thing that really, really made me feel the best about this award is I'm the very first one from the private sector. All the rest are from academia and agencies. So in my mind, that makes it even a bigger deal. But I'm deeply flattered. And that's enough about me. So let's talk about you for a while. Let's see. I'm missing some comments. Let's see here. I got to get down here. Let's see here. Kenneth Dwyer, do you have a video of fertilizing a pond before and after? I've heard you discuss it so much, but I haven't seen it done. I do have a video. You know, I'm pretty sure we do have a video. Now, where in the world it is, I don't know, because a lot of times when we shoot these videos, we put them up, and I don't necessarily archive them according to date. And oftentimes when I've done that in the past, it's about search, and I don't know how to find that. But let me just kind of take you through fertilization. When we fertilize the pond, and do not do that now. No fertilization now. It's too hot. Weird things can happen, so we don't want to do that now. Fertilization happens too quickly, the plankton blooms happen too fast, and you run a bigger risk of blue-green algae. But let me take you just a little bit through that process. In the springtime, we like to fertilize when the water temperature is constantly above 55, close to 60, and going up. In the mission, there's two reasons to fertilize. The water should be clear to fertilize it, because if you fertilize muddy water, it ain't going to work. And then it's not going to work if your alkalinity is too low. So you need clear water with alkalinity at least 40 parts per million or higher, because that's what it takes to generate a plankton bloom. But what happens when you fertilize, you're mixing fertilizer, whether it's a liquid, a granular, or a water-soluble fertilizer. The mission is get it dissolved into the water column in about the top 2 to 3 feet. So most people that do it for a living put it out with a pump, where they're drafting water from the pond or the lake, squirting it through a pump, mixing the fertilizer through the impeller with pond water and squirting it out through a trash pump in a boat. And what happens is when that fertilizer hits the water and it gets mixed well, and we mix it also with the prop wash of the boat, and when it gets mixed well, it promotes that plankton bloom. Now, there's 2 reasons to do that in the springtime, not now. In the springtime, because what that does is it helps decrease the visibility of the water to keep the UV rays of the sun off of the bottom and water deeper than about 3 feet. And what that does is it pushes back the growth of aquatic plants, rooted aquatic plants. You know, bushy pondweed, milfoil, plants like that, curly leaf pondweed. It backs that up because the sun can't reach the bottom where those plants grow. The second thing it does is it creates the food chain for newly hatched fish. Well, right now we're past the spawn. The likelihood of creating a blue-green algae bloom is much, much higher because it likes hot water, and it also likes cool water, but your risk is higher in this water. So we don't really want to fertilize, but that's the process. And what we do is we measure the visibility and then judge the color. Because when you fertilize a clear water pond, clear water meaning 48 inches of visibility or greater for this example. So we fertilize it, we come back and check it in a week or 10 days, check the visibility and the color. So when that color changes from that clear look to kind of a greenish tint, maybe even almost a pea soup color green, not the density of pea soup, but if you have an 18 to 24 inch visibility depth and the water turns green, it's going to shift in color as that bloom begins to mature. Now what happens is it starts off as phytoplankton, algae mostly, and then it begins to change color as the zooplankton are starting to feed on it. So the zooplankton eat that phytoplankton, which feeds a little bit bigger bugs like Daphnia, and backswimmer, stuff like that. And that's what causes the bloom to mature. And once that zooplankton does what they do, by then the baby fish have hatched, and that's what they feed on. And that's how you get the survival rates of your baby fish up, is by having a good plankton bloom in the spring. Well, what will happen is as the fish are feeding on those zooplankton, then the zooplankton disappear and the water will start turning a little bit green again, and it'll go back and forth. Now, if your timing is off, meaning that you do it too early or too late, then the zooplankton can completely deplete the phytoplankton and then the whole bloom crashes. So the water goes from kind of a rich green color to an olive green color to kind of an olive brown color to a brownish olive color, and then brown, and then crystal clear again. When that happens, the zooplankton have dominated and completely overeaten the phytoplankton, and hopefully your baby fish got what they need. Now, if the cycle runs like we want it to, you get the bloom going, in mid-April, early to mid-April, depending on what part of the planet you live, and it stays pretty healthy for a month to 6 weeks. And if you're watching and monitoring it, then you know when you need to change it. So let's see here. That takes care of that, I hope, for a little bit anyway. Travis Paul Smith. Travis, you know what? I need to make myself a note. I'm not sure I sent your address to Texas Hunter. Let me do that. Send Travis address to Texas Hunter. Thank you very much. Because I know he wanted to send you some goodies. He's going to, matter of fact, Texas Hunter, thank you for sponsoring us, Texas Hunter. They're going to send us some goodies that we can give away as well, some hats and some other cool stuff. All right, so let's see here. Yep, and Travis filled his Texas Hunter feeders with premium Aquamax MVP. That stuff's good stuff. Now, let's talk about that feeding. I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'll get down on these other questions here in a minute. But here's what happens when the water gets hot. I made myself a couple of notes. What happens in the heat? What should you do? There's some things going on right now that are happening fast. The water chemistry is influenced by the biology of the water. So the amount of plants that you've got, they're photosynthesizing and respiring. So that has an impact both on the oxygen levels, the carbon dioxide levels, and depending on how high your alkalinity is, it can affect the pH. Because the pH can spike up and down, as can the oxygen levels. Well, because if your pond's covered 40% or greater with aquatic plants that are pretty dense, like one of my ponds out here that I got to do something with here pretty quick. one of my small hatchery ponds in the last 3 weeks has exploded with bushy pondweed, so I got to deal with that. So I mean, I'm not because I'm the pond boss, I'm not excluded from the same things that you guys get to deal with. The difference is that I didn't pay attention to mine because I was traveling some. I knew we had some pondweed and the water's pretty shallow. I didn't think it would blow up as fast as it did, but it did because it got hot. So what happens is biological things expedite when it comes to the biology and the chemistry of what's interacting with the water. Now, what that means is what's going on biologically with fish metabolism. Now, when the water gets hot, largemouth bass actually slow down. Bluegill slow down some. Channel catfish slow down a little bit. Threadfin shad speed up. Gizzard shad speed up. So the temperature impacts the way the fish behave. And it affects the way they metabolize and the pathology and the physiology of their bodies. Well, that's all influenced by the temperature. Everything prefers a range of temperatures. For everything from polar bears to alligators, they have a range of temperatures that they prefer. That's why you don't see any polar bears eating alligators in Louisiana, and there ain't no alligators chewing on seals in Canada. So all that to say that the blooms that you have, the visibility depth that you have, the amount of plants that you've got, the biomass of the fish population you've got influences the water, which in turn influences the biomass of plants, crustaceans, invertebrates, and fish. Now, what that means to you is you should be paying attention to your waters this time of year. Now, if you have an aeration system, I'd be paying attention to my water temperature. I would be looking, if I owned a pond and I wanted to do the least amount of management as possible, I want to know the visibility depth and I want to know the temperature. Those two things are crucially important. Now, if you're aerating, you got to understand that aeration takes water from the bottom, moves it up in a plume like a mushroom, and allows that water to cascade and then interact with the atmosphere, which allows it to expel gases and receive gases, but it's also influenced by the temperature. So by checking your temperature, you don't really want your water temperature to get above about 83 or 84 when you're aerating. That's the key point. If you're aerating and your water temperature gets to be 86 or 87, your fish are going to be distressed. So what I tell people in southern states is check your temperature top to bottom. Put a thermometer on a cord and check it. Put it on a piece of twine and check it. If your water temperature is the same at the bottom as it is at the top and it's above 84, put your aeration system on a timer and run it from 9 at night till 9 in the morning. That's when you're going to be running it when the temperatures are the coolest. Here this morning our temperature when I went outside was 81. So I know that it went from about 94 to 81 from 9 o'clock last night till 9 o'clock this morning. So I think that's, I'm seeing some things here that with this new format, looks like I can bring people on camera. So we might be able to do the guest thing again. All right. So now the other thing I want to talk about in this with this hot temperature time that we've got is how you handle your fish. It's okay to go fishing. And this is a great time to be culling bass. If you have a culling program, now is a good time to do it. Fish are still going to feed, although they're not going to be as active this time of year as they are in the spring and the fall when their temperatures are better. But you can still catch some and you can still be culling some fish. But if you catch a monster fish and you can feel it, get it in as quick as you can. Shoot a picture or two. Don't drop it on the ground and get it back in the water as soon as you can. That's a big, big deal. Get that thing back in the water as soon as you can so it can recover from the stress of being caught. So let's see here. Danny Mack, congratulations. Jason Jones, thank you. All right. Zach says, I'll never forget watching the old Purina videos. That's where I started watching. That's pretty cool. Hey, there's Dave Davidson. Hey, Dave Davidson, good to see you, bud. He's one of our, matter of fact, he's the very first moderator for the Ask the Boss discussion forum at pondboss.com. He's been around longer than anybody. Dave, I can't remember how old you are, but I know you're close to 112. So I'm so glad that you're hanging out with us tonight. We need to, once this kind of corona stuff dies down a little bit, I want to slip down to that favorite barbecue place where you and I have been a couple times down in Euless, Texas, and we'll go spend a little time and eat some ribs or something to catch up. Or heck, we just meet halfway or something. We'll do something. Clark Cole, congratulations. Hey, man, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's Chuck Brinkman checking in. John Wilson from Dewey Lake, Michigan. It's probably a little cool. Well, I don't know. It may not be cooler there than it is here. That reference back to those where Zach says watching the Purina videos back. This is to kind of give you a little bit of history that might be interesting to you. Is back in 1995, Pond Boss had been going for about 3 years. Matter of fact, here's the very first issue of Pond Boss. Check that out. There's the very first one. That's July, August of 1992. And I've still got a stack of them about that thick from 1992. Isn't that funny? And now here we are today. Here's the latest version. I think this one was probably, 16 pages. Yeah, 16 pages. There you go. And this one is 64 pages now. So we've come a long ways. But back then, in 1995, I helped start Pond Boss in 91 and 92 with Mark McDonald. Then in 95, I got involved in the business side. I bought in the business side then and helped run the business side of Pond Boss. And one of the first things we did was send a letter to Purina Mills marketing department. And one of the guys that read the letter was Brad Shue. And Brad Shue checks in on this broadcast from time to time. Well, we had a meeting with them. And they wanted to create a new feed. And I've told this story on this broadcast before about how we met with him in Glen Rose. I remember Clark Cole chiming in on that because he knows that, and his son, they know the owners of that barbecue place, Hammond's Barbecue there. Well, that's where Game Fish Chow was born. Well, that led to a relationship to where I really wanted to kind of start promoting Pond Boss and promoting pond management and just start going to teach people. So started working out a deal with some Purina dealers to go give speeches. I didn't charge for those speeches back then. I do a little bit now just to cover the cost. But I might drive 200 miles to go give a speech to 14 people at a Purina dealer store. Or I might go 40 miles and speak to 300. And that's where I started really learning to speak and learning to talk in front of a crowd and answer questions. And man, I was nervous. But after about 20 of those or so, you hear people asking the same questions over and over and over, you start to kind of get the answers down. And where I'm going with this is as Dr. Mark Griffin, who was nutritionist with Purina there around 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, as he started to develop the Aquamax line of fish food, and I got to help with that, Purina decided they really wanted to promote that. So we started shooting some vignettes, some little 2 to 4 minute vignettes about fish pond management. Didn't necessarily talk about feeding fish, but we talked about anything from fertilizing a pond to how to feed catfish to checking aquatic plants. And they showed those vignettes on RFD TV. It was called Animal Makeover TV. So I got to go shoot those vignettes all over the nation. We shot some at Richmond Mill Lake in North Carolina. We shot some in Missouri. We shot some at my house. We shot some in East Texas. And each one of those vignettes showed on Animal Makeover TV. Then there were, I think, 3 times that I went to Nashville and we did a live TV show called Monday Night Live, Purina Monday Night Live, where people could call in on a TV show, which that makes good TV. You got 3 guys sitting at a panel. I think one time it was Ray Scott and Dr. Griffin and me, and then there was Gordon Ballum, and let's see, Bruce Candela was on one of them. So anyway, that's where all that stuff came from, which was pretty fun. And I think every one of those videos is still on YouTube somewhere. All right, so Travis Paul Smith, just want to give my thoughts last week. A viewer asked about 2,4-D poison. I have a friend that had 3 1-acre ponds, sprayed 2 ponds with Roundup. One he didn't. The 2 ponds with the poison killed all the fish. The 1-acre pond not poisoned, all fish lived. Just what I know of. Well, here's the lesson from that. Is you follow the label on whatever herbicide you choose. Follow the label. That's a big, big, big deal. If you don't stay within that label, then you run the risk of killing the fish. Now, those fish, I bet a $100 bill, did not die from the herbicide. They died as a consequence of killing too much plant life too quick, if that's the case. So it's real important that you know what you're doing before, and especially when the water's hot. Because when you treat those plants, they die fast, then they rot fast, they consume oxygen fast. And that's what can lead to a fish kill, is the rapid decomposition of those plants. There's Kim Moore. John Wilson got the hashtag. You guys know the drill. Like we mentioned earlier, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like, share this video to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. Pond Boss mug. And I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and they made the comment, they saw the Pond Boss. They said, cheaper than a Friday night date. Well, there it is. There's the new version of Pond Boss right there. And if you folks aren't subscribing and you have a pond, you really should. And not just because I'm one of the owners of this thing and I publish it. It's because the information here is outstanding. There's Mark Cornwell's son, and he's talking about that. What does that fish look like? Does it look like a golden shiner? No, it's not. It's not. You know, but are your predator fish really all predators? And are your prey fish all really prey fish? I mean, the more you know, the better pond meister you're going to be. $35 a year. You can go to pondboss.com and subscribe there. You can call the office and subscribe there. So Scott McClurg, our buddy from Nebraska, just knocked out a lot of sago pondweed, and his water is 84.5 at the surface. Should I start running my aerators at night? The way you do that, Scott, where you are in Nebraska, you could probably get away with running your aeration system 18 to 20 hours a day. But what I would do is I would go ahead and run it 24 hours. If your surface water now is 84.5, check it down low and see what it is down low. If it's 84.5 down low, put it on a timer, probably from about 8 o'clock at night till 10 in the morning in your part of the country. So let's see here. We got Brent Rutan. I just built a small open-air pavilion next to my aerator. It's too loud for people to enjoy the new structure. So I placed the aerator on a timer from midnight to 5:30 a.m. Is that enough time? No. I tell you what, Brent, I would put that timer from about 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock there. And that's probably good enough. You've got a 1.5 acre pond with 3 bottom diffusers. Yeah, you know what? No, I do that from 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock, because if you've got 3 diffusers in a 1.5 acre pond, you're going to be turning that water over probably 3 times a day. So, and yeah, that's what I do. Yep. Zach Bollinger, I'd really use triploid grass carp. You know, the thing is with using grass carp, here's the best way to explain that. Each tool in your pond management toolkit serves a purpose. A sledgehammer is different than a claw hammer. You know, herbicides are a sledgehammer. Triploid grass carp are a claw hammer. You know, so if you've got so much plant life that you need a sledgehammer, it's going to be hard to drive a tent stake in the ground with a claw hammer, a lot harder than it is with a sledgehammer. You're going to have a hard time breaking a rock with a claw hammer compared to a sledgehammer. So the triploid grass carp, there's certain plants they'll eat, certain plants they won't, at a rate. And that rate is typically 7 times their body weight per day. Now, for you mathematicians out there, if you've got a 7-pound triploid grass carp who's going to eat close to 50 pounds of vegetation a day, you got to kind of do the math. Out of that 50 pounds of vegetation, about 80% of that, or maybe even more, that's water. You know, and then when they convert it, they're converting it about the dry mass about 10 to 1. So they eat that. They don't gain a lot, but if they're eating 50 pounds of that vegetation a day, that might be an area that's about 2/3 the size of a Purina Aquamax sack. Okay, so if you've got 10 grass carp in a 1.5 acre pond, how much good are they going to do? They're going to be like mowing the grass where they want to mow it. Whereas if you need the sledgehammer, that's where the herbicides come in to make it manageable. So part of your vegetation management strategy is not so much to just interfere with or eliminate all your plants. You want to manage the plants, because some plants are good. I mean, when I say some plants, here's what I mean by that. I mean, some volume of plants is good. Some species of plants are good. And part of your job is to figure out which one of those are. Okay, so look at here. Mike Cottrell. Dave's my closest name. Really? I'll be the dang gum. I didn't know that. That's cool. All right, Christopher Aguilar, no more excuses. If you got time to eat boudin, you got time to call the Palm Boss office. Been so busy, I keep forgetting. Well, I'm going to remind you. You know what? I'm going to tell the girls. Call Aguilar to renew. There you go. All right. Hey, just call in tomorrow. 903-564-6144. Talk to Leanne. She'll get it handled for you. All right. Ben Cascles. Hey, Bob from Cayuga Lake, New York. I love the Finger Lakes. Good gosh. That's so beautiful up there. And that gum, it's just the Finger Lakes are stunning. You know, the history, how they were formed from during the Ice Age, from, you know, glaciers shoving south, carving them out, all those beautiful round rocks, vineyards, wineries along the lake, just beautiful place up there. Christopher Aguilar, the label is the law. You know what? That's right. The label is the law. It actually is. So let's go. Let's see here. Danny Mack says, I seem to recall that chemical reaction rates tend to double with each 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And you know what? I would buy into that. You know, I can't sit here and say, yeah, I know that, but I know you do because of your background. People don't know it, but Danny Mack is a nuclear physicist. That guy's brilliant. He got an engineering brain and a biologist attitude. I love that. Okay, so let's see. Dick Tabbert checking in from Northwest Ohio. You know, going back to that rates double with each 10 degrees Fahrenheit. I would say chemical rates biologically do double. In other words, plants, when they die at twice the rate, they decompose at twice the rate, they influence the chemistry at twice the rate. You know, so I sure buy into that, because our practices when we're out there working on aquatic plants this time of year, you better be really picky. And if you're going to choose to use herbicides, I would tell you, depending on the volume of plants you've got, if you've got more than about 30% coverage of a pond and you want to take some out, or you want to take all of it out for whatever reason, don't treat more than a third at a time, and give it 10 days to 2 weeks to do what it does, to compost, decompose. Let's see here. Who else we got going on? There's Dick Tabbert again, Deion Myers, Micah Jefferson, Southern Indiana checking in. Ron Ardoin says, will adding ag lime to increase alkalinity in acidic water slow the growth of bladderwort? Yes, it will. Bladderwort will grow in alkaline waters, but it prefers acidic waters. So adding some ag lime will inhibit the growth rates of those plants that prefer acid waters, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will stop it. Now here's where it gets complicated. We added some ag lime to a pond almost an acre about 3 months ago, and the bladderwort's still there, but it's not real dense. And so what happened was Cara started to grow. Well, Cara is skunk grass with kind of it's an algae, one of the branched algae that's real crispy, crunchy. Cara, skunk grass, and muskgrass are the nicknames. Real common in highly alkaline waters. And if you drag some out on the bank and you leave it there, when it dries up, it turns snow white because of the calcium carbonate that it sucks out of the water. So what can happen in waters that tend toward acidity with aquatic plant life that reflects that, you get a start of Cara, and it's going to take that alkalinity and try to diminish it by absorbing it and using it physiologically, which that helps the bladderwort. So those two plants are actually competing with each other. And that's why the bladderwort tends to not go away, but it can be inhibited with the addition. Terry Dooley says, I skipped his question. If I skipped the question, it's because I didn't see it. So let me go back down there and take a look. Terry Dooley. Chance Birch. Look at there. I didn't see Chance checking in from the hospital. My new fishing buddies. Chance Birch had a baby. Congratulations, Big Daddy. That's cool. All right, let me look down here so I can see where Terry Dooley disappeared to. Let's see. Danny Mack says, I must confess that white shirt you gave us, mine has blue dye on it. Lesson learned. All right, let's see here. I'm looking. I'm not seeing it. Jason Jones on down. Clark Cole. John Wilson. Oh, there we go. There's Terry Dooley right below Kim Moore checking in. Does Coontail regrow from fragmentation? Absolutely, yes, it does. Yeah, Coontail regrows from fragmentation. Now, here's the way Coontail works. Coontail is not rooted. So it tends to, it grows in the water column and it can migrate. You run your boat through it, you chop it up, those little fragments are going to go sprout new colonies. So Coontail, yes, it does reproduce by fragmentation. As a matter of fact, that's the primary way. It also has seeds, but it doesn't grow in the ground. It's never rooted. So when you have Coontail, yes, it does regrow from fragmentation. All right, so let's see here. Let me scroll on down here a little bit. Oh, Danny Mac, I missed this one. He says, looks like the bluegill are preparing for this coming full moon. The rain and dust drove a bloom that I'm trying to dent with dye. Ah, okay, no wonder you got blue on a white shirt. Well, now you have a tie-dyed shirt, so to speak. It's going to be that way. I know this. If you got it on your shirt, you probably either look like the Tidy Bowl Man or Papa Smurf because you got it on you, too. And talk to Clark Cole about dye. Clark Cole is a physical therapist who has raised his family. Now he's got grandkids. But when Clark was in, I think, just right out of high school and in college, he drove all the way from Denton, Texas to work with me, for me, back in the, probably 86, 87, 88. And I sent him out to dye a pond one day, and I said, man, do not get this on you. He said, I can't get it on me. He said, I got to be in a wedding tomorrow night. This was on a Friday. And he had to hustle up and go get the pond dyed so he could get back, clock out, and be back in time to go to the rehearsal. And Clark, if you're watching me, chime in on this, but when he got back, he had blue polka dots all over his face. He was blue on both hands and his arms, and he was going to go be in a wedding. So you got to be careful with that dye. You don't ever throw dye into the wind, guys. And I don't remember what Clark did, but he was speckled. Okay, let's see here. I'm going on down here just a little bit, so I'll make sure I'm not missing anything else. Don't want to get called out on that. Holy cow. Let's see here. Steve Lewis got 6+ inches Monday and lost several fish. Well, okay, here's what's going on. Steve, if I could bring you on live, we'd do it and we'd talk about it. But what happened with Steve Lewis, Steve is a fisheries biologist. He's got some hatchery ponds and he grows fish for sale. And when you have hatchery ponds that might be 6 feet deep at the deepest, and they stratify at 3 and you get 6 inches of rain, they're going to de-stratify that pond because the temperature is going to drop when that fresh 6 inches of water hits it. When that water turns over, it mixes it, and that can stress the fish enough that you can lose a few fish. And that's probably what happened there. So let me go on down here. Jimmy Hammonds from Louisiana. Derek Reuter. I'm having a 3/8 acre pond dug as we speak in central Wisconsin. What's the best man-made habitat for bluegill? Okay, there's two things. Let's see. Steve Alexander wants to talk about genetic outbreeding and bass genetics. Importance of adding. Yeah, I'll hit that here in just a second. So Derek, the best man-made habitat for bluegill. Now I don't know what your goals are, but whenever we launch our electrofishing boat, if there's a beaver lodge in that lake or that pond, I go straight toward it. And we stick those tentacles, that anode, in that mass of branches. It looks like popcorn with bluegill just boiling out of it. Bluegill prefer dense structure. Think cedar trees, think brush. The problem with that is it's hard to fish. But the question you're asking me is, what do bluegill prefer, man-made? So they like, and if I were going to look at that, I'd be looking at moss-back fish attractors, stuff like that, where you can add some density. They also like shallow vegetation, like the pondweeds, all of Illinois pondweed, small leaf pondweed, American pondweed. All those pondweeds, they love that density they can get in and hide and grow some mass. You also need some spawning beds for them. They like to spawn in water from 6 inches to 18 inches deep. I like to design my spawning beds at about 2 feet deep, maybe 2.5 feet deep, because I don't like the wading birds to be able to wade so deep that their feathers don't get wet, and they can eat these dadgum bluegill as they're spawning, because they can really really wear them out. All right. Oh, look at there, Clark Cole. Great memory. It can happen, and it did. So there's Clark. Holy cow, Clark. That was, let's see, 20, 30, 35, 30, 34, 35 years ago. Woo! Kyle Edwards, can I stock the redfin shad in a 12-acre pond this time of year? Yes, you can. Now, I'm going to come back to Steve's question in a minute because I want to spend some time on that. Yes, you can stock redfin shad in a 12-acre pond this time of year. Now, here's the deal. This is what nobody knows out there unless you're in the business. If you're in this business, you know that threadfin shad stocked in the spring typically come from wild sources or fish farms that are far enough south that their shallow hatchery ponds aren't decimated by frigid temperatures. Threadfin shad die at 42 degrees. So most of the time, threadfin shad are stocked when they're available, and the adults are available in the springtime when they're running in public lakes where it's legal to harvest them. Now, this time of year, if you're going to be buying threadfin shad, you're going to buy them probably from a commercial fish farm. You know, Tyler Fish Farms is one of them. American Sport Fish Hatchery sells them. You know, the other fish farms sell them, but you're only going to be getting shad that are about that long. Little bitty guys, 1.5 inches, 2 inches. As long as they're big enough to handle, the fish farms will handle them. Now, here's the caveat. If you stocked those adults 3 months ago or 2 months ago, you've had a spawn by now. If you're going to buy them now for a 12-acre lake, you're going to be buying young of the year that won't be able to reproduce for another 90 days or so. Then they'll reproduce. So depending on where your 12-acre lake is and what's in it, if it's a brand new 12-acre lake, I'd say by all means, stock some threadfins in it, especially if you're in an area, if you're in part of the country where you know they're going to survive over the winter. Okay, let's go back to, and I see Troy Goldsby just checked in. I'm going to get to spend some time with Troy here a little bit after this show. We're going to do a video and a podcast for Matt Rail and Private Waters. Oh gosh, Troy, type in the name of the website. Holy cow, it's escaping me. With Matt Rail and Troy Goldsby are the hosts for this show I'm going to do later on, which they'll record it and they'll put it up when they're ready to put it up. Okay, so Steve Alexander talking about genetic outbreeding and bass genetics, importance of adding new genes. Okay, well, here's what happens. Let's say you've got a lake in southeastern Oklahoma and you want to grow some Florida bass, and you want to buy some of Steve Lewis's Florida bass, get some F1s from American Sport Fish, get some Northerns from up there in Kansas at Buzz Hartley Fish Farm, and you want to mix up the gene pool. So you do that. And the main mission in that Oklahoma lake, and I'm throwing all this out there really fast because in Oklahoma, we know the temperatures can drop cold enough, fast enough that you can kill it can kill a pure strain Florida bass. So to kind of hedge that bet, you're mixing the gene pool. But the reason you're mixing the gene pool is because you really want to grow some huge bass. Well, either the Florida strain or the first generation cross of those F1s, they're going to be the fish most likely to grow the largest over that span of time, 6, 8, 10 years, whatever it takes in a lake. You know, so where Steve is going here, Steve Alexander, Private Water Fishing is Steve's website. Check out, look up friend Steve Alexander, take a look at his business. He leases ponds from people and then turns around and subleases them to his anglers. So the landowner gets paid a fee to come fish your pond. So that's what Steve is. So the genetic outbreeding over time, let's say that you've got Florida bass and you got Northerns and they reproduce and they have F1s. And then and you buy some F1s. If those F1s breed with something else, what do you get? You know, you're going to get an F2 or an FX or an unknown. So you don't know what the gene pool is going to be. Now, something that's real important to understand. I have yet to meet a lake that reached its peak and got better. Now, listen to that. Like when Troy Goldsby builds a lake and he wants to grow giant fish for his clients, he's got some superstar country music singers, superstars out there, and he's a superstar. You know, he wants to grow the biggest fish. He knows his best chance and probably his only chance to grow the biggest fish is going to be the first 10 to 12 years of that lake's life. By that time, the fish have begun to reproduce. We don't have nearly the control over the dynamics. inferior fish are thriving because that's what nature does. You know, it's not all superior fish that are going to thrive. There's going to be some inferior fish that get in there and they take over, and, you know, they may grow to 14 inches and quit. So what Steve is asking about is genetic outbreeding. So as these fish reproduce in the dynamics of that population over an extended period of time, the genetics can get diluted. Well, in that case, it's pretty smart to come back in with some known genetics, especially with largemouth bass or bluegill, and add those into the lake in a timely fashion where they can have an advantage over the fish that are spawned in your lake. So typically what that means is if you can get some superior genetic fish from a southern hatchery and get them in there bigger than the baby bass are that are in your pond, then you give these newly stocked fish an advantage. So essentially you've enhanced the genetics of that fishery. Now there's some debate about that. You know, there's some real knowledgeable genetics guys that say it doesn't make any difference. Well, I'm going to tell you that it doesn't cost much to enhance the genetics. So if it doesn't make any difference, if those guys are right and it doesn't make any difference, you did no harm. And let's say you stocked 100 bass that you paid $125 for, and 2 of them are females that are exceptional and they grow up and you see them again in 8 years as 12-pound bass, that's okay. Plus, they've added to the herd. All right, so let's see here. Justin, herons have been killing my spawning red ear. Yeah. You know what you can do? I'll tell you what you can do. I'm sitting here thinking. I'm thinking gunshots in California. Wait a minute. No, I'm not. If you would take some rebar, and if you know where your red ear sunfish or bluegill are spawning, drive some rebar in and then run some nylon cord, just zigzag it back and forth across those spawning beds at about 25 inches high or so, and those herons can't step over it. And you can keep them out of your spawning beds by doing that. Now, that doesn't look too cool, but do you want the birds to not eat your fish? And, you know, when the spawning season is over, you can pull that stuff out. But I would do something like that. So Derek says, thanks. My goal is to be able to grow large bluegills. We're also having a beach for the kids to swim. Perfect. By adding spawning beds for bluegill, will that help keep them from spawning on the beach? No, it won't. It won't keep them from spawning on the beach, but your kids splashing in the water will keep them from spawning on the beach. So activity will push them away, typically. Now, with a 3/8 acre pond and you're wanting to grow big bluegills, you're going to have a few bass in there to keep the bluegill numbers down. You know, and I would still encourage the bluegills to spawn, but I would also encourage some bass to keep the bluegill numbers down and let the best of the best thrive. You still need some dense habitat. In a 3/8 acre pond, I'm going to tell you, if a third of the pond was ringed with American pondweed and you had a couple of pretty dense brush piles of hardwood limbs, that's enough to protect those bluegills. And feed them. Feed them Aquamax MVP. Or do like Chuck Brinkman does. He goes and buys the fry starter foods that are little bitty, about as big around as a pinhead. And he starts feeding his baby bluegills as soon as he knows that they're coming off the nests. So you can do that. So Jimmy Hammonds, oh, you know what? I'm going to stop for a minute. And I do want to say thanks to Purina Mills for sponsoring this show. I do appreciate them. There's their ad right there on the back of the Pond Balls magazine, and they have an ad on the inside front cover. They've been there forever. And also Texas Hunter. I deeply do appreciate Texas Hunter as well because they sponsor this show. I saw David Schneiderman checked in, Easy Docs. David, I appreciate your sponsorship as well. Okay, Jimmy Hammond says, so I'm being told I need ag lime in my pond. My pond is 3/4 of an acre. Depth is 10 to 14 feet. It's real cloudy and alkalinity is low. It's full of sac-a-lait, which is crappie, bass, and brim. Then I would sure do that. I would sure add some ag lime. And in the 3/4 acre pond in South Louisiana, I would say, you know what, I'd go ahead. You know, this is going to sound a little bit excessive, but I'm going to say 2 tons. You know, 2 tons isn't that much. It's really not. And if you add 2 tons into 3/4 of an acre, you're probably not going to need, and when I say probably, I'll define that in a minute, probably not going to need to add any lime for another 5 or 6 years. That probably is contingent on how much flow you get through the pond from runoff, from rain. You know, and most of those ponds over there are excavated ponds. Matt Hines just had Matt Rail electrofish his pond in Indiana. You know what? Matt is one of the true great guys in pond management. I mean, he's got that burning flame. He really does. It just won't go out. He couldn't put that passion flame out if he wanted to. Pat Williamson says, will grass carp eat fully submerged spike rush, AK roe? You know what? They will eat it. They don't prefer it. And I have yet to see them totally control it. But I tell you what they will do. That slender spike rush that's growing like a thick carpet on the bottom, I've watched them eat it and then not be able to consume it, and then it floats to the top. And you'll end up seeing spike rush that's washed up on the shore somewhere in a big mat where the grass carp, you know, they have real soft, fleshy lips, and they can go upside down a little bit, and then they'll graze and they'll pull, and then they'll pull it into their mouth. But a lot of times if they pull it and it comes out of the ground, they don't have any teeth. They can't chew it. They got to be able to grab it with their mouth, suck it down their throat, and then in the back of their throat, they've got these pharyngeal grinder pads, woo, where it grinds it up in their throat as they're swallowing it. So I'm not going to tell you that they're going to control it, but they can eat it. But I've watched them pull it up and watch the mats float. Kyle Edwards, thanks for the answer. I think I'll wait till next spring when I have some bass in it. 28-year-old pond. Yeah. The other thing about threadfin shad, Kyle, is you want a good bloom. You really do. You want a good plankton bloom because threadfin shad are filter feeders. And if you guys don't know about threadfin shad, let me take you a little bit through that. Threadfin shad don't have an air bladder. So they're constantly swimming through the water, filtering water through their mouths, and whatever's in the water filters over their gill rakers, which are the little teeth-looking devices inside their gills, and it funnels anything in the water down their throat as they expel the water out of their gills. So they're continually on the move, filter feeding. So they're not necessarily grazers, they're filter feeders, especially when they're small. So if you don't have a good plankton bloom in your lake, and you're crowded with bass, and you stock threadfin this time of year, survival rates are going to be really, really, really low of those threadfin shad. I don't want to talk anybody out of buying something, but I kind of do. All right, so Michael Eric says, so F1s will not make it in a central Iowa lake, I take. I don't think that's the truth. In central Iowa, you guys have a thing called ice. And ice insulates the frigid temperatures off of the water. For example, now F1s, I think they'd make it pretty much in most of the nation. Now, the bigger question is, are they legal in Iowa? I don't know. I know they're not legal in some states like Nebraska, for example. They don't want to taint the genetics. And F1s are not legal in South Florida because they don't want to change the genetics down there. They want to keep their pure Florida strain bass in Florida. You know, so know the laws. But the question that you're asking is are they going to die in a central Iowa lake? I don't think they would. I think they'd live. I think they'd struggle because they're not cold-natured. You know, you've got enough months of cold weather that they might not grow at nearly the same rates that they're going to grow, you know, in northeast Texas, for example, or southern Arkansas. But I don't necessarily think they would die. So let's see here. Look at there. There's Nick Peterson, who's a fisheries biologist. Nick actually went to South Dakota State, and then he moved to Mississippi State. Got to spend time with Wes Neal in genetic outbreeding, bringing back some old memories from Mississippi State University and Pond Boss. He made a presentation at one of the Pond Boss conferences at Big Cedar, as I recall. Good to see you there, Nick. How do you know that someone offers quality genetic fish? You know what? That's a caveat emptor deal, and most of them stand on their own reputation. It doesn't take long in today's world of social media and, you know, rapid communications to flush out those that don't know what they're doing. All it takes is one genetic test, and people can prove up just how good those fish are. And there's ways to have them tested genetically. One of the things you can do is ask those hatcheries to provide some documentation about their genetics. And the reputable ones, all of them have that. They all have a letter where, because you know what, and if they're reputable, they want to know. They want to make sure that the brood fish that they're using are what they think they are. So since I know American sport fish hatchery, I'm going to tell you that what they do, I know what they do because I've watched them do it. They've got pit tags in every one of their bass. They know the source. They know the lengths and weights when they got it. They know the age of the fish, and they have it genetically tested. So they've got those fish tagged, identified individually. That way they can choose which fish are going to breed with what. So they're annually getting some fish as they bring new fish in for brood fish. They have those fish tested. So the reputable ones have paperwork and tracking of the genetics of their fish. So you can find that out if you want to. Holy cow, it's already 7:25. How'd that happen? Ron says, why is it the most hybrid sunfish like hybrid bluegill are 90% males, but hybrid bass are able to reproduce 50% male, 50% female? Here's the reason. Those hybrid sunfish are hybrids, true hybrids. They're a cross between two species. They're a cross between female green sunfish and male bluegills. It just so happens, as nature does it, though true hybrids of those two fish are mostly males. And that has something to do with the way that their genes pair when they're fertilized, when the eggs are fertilized. But on the other side, the hybrid bass are really not hybrids. They're integrated crosses, which means they can reproduce. Now, here's a good example in the cattle business. If you take a Hereford bull and cross it with an Angus cow, you get what's called a black baldy. But that black baldy's still a cow because you got a bull and a cow. Those are cattle. It's the same species. When those two cross, you get a black baldy. Well, what happens if you cross a black baldy with a black baldy? You're going to get some that are red. You're going to get some that have white faces. You're going to get some that are black and some that are a different mix. So when those genes get crossed down the line, you get something different than what you get with that first cross. But the difference is, to answer your question, is you got true hybrids compared to integrated crosses of the same species. That's the way that goes. All right, let's see here. I'm planning on having a predator-heavy pond. You can sure do that, Derek. That'll help you grow some big bluegills. Steve said, perhaps I should have been more specific. After a pond ages and it was stocked with Florida and native bass and they spawn, after a few years, would you expect the pond to have more Florida or native genetics, assuming your original stocking was 100% F1s or 50-50 native Floridas? Would you expect the pond to have more Florida? You know what? That depends on where it is. I've seen ponds do both. I've seen ponds go where every single fish in that gene pool has got some Florida genetics in it. I've seen some like along the Red River up in North Texas and Southern Oklahoma that were stocked like in 1982, 83, where you can't find one Florida gene in that pond because those Florida bass died during a hard cold spell like in 83, 84, or 1989. So if you're really into the genetics, have some tested. Capture a few fish, have them confirmed. And that way, it's going to cost you $300 to $500 to have the samples tested, but then you know what you have. And if you don't like it, then add some new genetics. Or you can spend that $300 or $400 on adding the genetics of the fish that you desire and do no harm at the worst. The worst thing you're going to do is do no harm. The best thing you're going to do is you're going to enhance the existing genetics with those that you want to influence it with. All right, Kyle Edwards, nice to be told the truth. Well, you bet. Travis Paul Smith, great show. Thanks, boss. The family is doing great, buddy. They are. Can I get threadfin shad shipped to South Louisiana? It's mostly Dunn's fish that sell around here. Yeah, there are other suppliers. Spend a little time online. I know there's several folks that can bring threadfin shad to South Louisiana. And I know there's some local sources, but I don't know who they are. I remember talking to Dr. Jim Geisler up in Monroe, and there was some guy that was seining them out of a power plant lake up there and distributing. I don't know his name. I don't know who did it. But I think if you do a little bit of digging that you can find that out. So, hey, you know what? 7:29, knocking on the door at 7:30. Travis, I will go back and find your email and forward that to Texas Hunter because I forgot to do that. So, hey, listen, appreciate all the kind words and appreciate your attention, appreciate your attendance, and thank you for watching this show. And if you got more questions, pitch them at me. I'm planning on broadcasting again from here next Wednesday night. Got a big week coming up this week. I helped design a lake over near Belzoni, Mississippi, and now I get to go over there and put the final blessings on it before they start adding water to it, and we get ready to stock it. So, hey, subscribe to Pond Boss. Here's the brand new issue. New and improved. Got a brand new layout. So until next Wednesday, I'm going to bid you farewell, and thanks again for watching, everybody. Adios.